everyone, it's Sandy, and in today's video I will be talking about all the books that I read in the month of July. I ended up reading 9 books in July, and the very first one that I read is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. This is an adult mystery thriller book that I've been wanting to read for so long, and it follows this woman named Anna Fox who lives in New York City and she has agoraphobia. One night she's looking through the window and she sees something shocking that's happening in her neighbor's home. I ended up giving this book a 4.25 out of 5 stars. I thought the story was so compelling. I was hooked from the very beginning. And the thing that I found so compelling about the story is the fact that the main character is an alcoholic, and I just loved reading from her point of view because of how unreliable she is. I wasn't completely blown away by the twists at the end, but wow, there are a lot of things in this book that I didn't see coming. I really want to get into more adult mystery thriller books, and this was definitely a really great book that I enjoyed reading. Also, this book is being made into a movie and I'm so excited about that. I would rate this book a 4.25 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is actually a reread, and that is A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. I believe I reread A Number in the Ashes in June, so I wanted to continue my reread of this book since the third book recently came out. This is the second book in A Number in the Ashes. I really don't have much to say about it because it is a reread and it is the second book, so I don't really have much to say without making it spoilery, but I did really like the expansion on the world. I also really enjoyed the snippets of magic in this book. It's definitely not a huge part of the story, but it's something that pops up every now and then, and I'm really intrigued about that and I really want to know more. I still think I enjoyed the first book better than the second book, but it was still a really great sequel, and I would rate this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. This book follows the teen descendants of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. It takes place at a Connecticut boarding school where one day someone ends up being murdered. I don't really know how I feel about this book. I did listen to the audiobook version. I don't know if it was like the narrator or the story itself, but I felt myself constantly zoning in and out of the audiobook, so I didn't enjoy this book as much as I probably would have if I physically read it myself. The plot was definitely really interesting, but I felt like it was the characters that I didn't enjoy as much. I definitely enjoyed the dynamics between these two characters, but individually I just didn't really care about them. I do want to continue the series, but I'm probably going to stick to reading the physical copies of them. I would rate this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is Save the Date by Matson. This book takes place over the course of 3 days. It follows the main character Charlie, whose older sister is getting married, and pretty much leading up to the wedding, everything goes wrong. I've been hearing a lot of mixed things about this book, but I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really fun and entertaining read. If you're the type of person that don't like reading something where everything goes wrong, you might not enjoy this book because it may be stressful to read about, and I thought that I was going to be really stressed reading this book. If this was a movie, I probably would have been a lot more stressed seeing it visually, but since I was reading this book, I was able to sort of distance myself from what was happening, so I did have a good time reading this book. I really love that it was very family oriented. Charlie is the youngest of 4 other siblings, and I just really enjoyed all these different family dynamics between each of the relationships that Charlie has with her other siblings. One thing that I do wish was included more in the book were the comic strips. Charlie's mom creates comic strips based on her family, and with each day we get a page of a comic strip, and I really wish we could have seen more of those sprinkled throughout the book. But overall, I would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is How to Make a Wish by Ashley Herring Blake. I've been wanting to read this book for so long, and I'm glad that I finally read it. This book follows Grace. She has an unreliable mother who is also an alcoholic. One day, Grace meets this girl named Eva who recently moved to town, and they start developing feelings for one another, but this book is just so much more than what the synopsis sounds like. What I loved about this book is how the author portrayed the different types of relationships in this book. We have this relationship with Grace and her mother, Grace and her best friend Luca, and Grace and this love interest Ava. I think these relationships are so well written and they just felt so raw and authentic, especially concerning Grace's relationship with her mom and with Eva. This book is like a mixture of grief and hope. There's so much grief surrounding Grace's relationship with her mom. Grace's mom is a well-written, shitty parent, and you're feeling all this grief for Grace and the things that she has to deal with because of her mom, but you're also experiencing moments of hope where you think things can change, and also through the other characters that are in Grace's life. I do think the romance is a bit insta-lovey, but I still really enjoyed it. Overall, I would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is Stay Sweet by Siobhan and Vivian. This book follows Amelia, who has worked at an ice cream stand for the past 3 summers, and this upcoming summer she is promoted to head girl, but on the first day of her taking on this role, the owner of the ice cream stand passes passes away. This is an ice cream stand that has been run by all girls since it opened, and since the owner has passed away, the owner's grandnephew comes in to take on this business. I listened to this book on audiobook and I really enjoyed the ice cream stand storyline. However, one thing that I disliked about this book so much was the growing tensions between Amelia and her best friend Kate. I really liked Amelia's character and I loved seeing her passion and dedication to running this ice cream stand. On the other hand, I thought Kate was just being really immature and it was just so frustrating to read about. The second that Grady, who is the owner's grandnephew, comes into the book, the tension between Kate and Amelia just continued to progress and I just did not like that. I really wish we could have gotten to know more about the other girls at the ice cream stand and their friendships with one another instead of focusing on all the problems that Kate and Amelia were having. It felt like the author was constantly telling the reader that the girls at the ice cream stand have a very unique and special bond and friendship with one another, but she wasn't really showing it because these other girls are like very minor characters. I can't even remember any of their names, so that just shows how insignificant they were to the story. I also really love the snippets that we get to see of the owner's diary. It was just really nice to read about how this ice cream stand came to be. I thought the romance was really cute and sweet, and I do really like that it wasn't the main focus of the story. Overall, I would rate this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is Furyborn by Legrand. This is a story that follows two main characters and it takes place over 1,000 years apart. In this world, there is a prophecy of two queens, a queen of light and a queen of blood. The first main character is Riel, and she accidentally exposes her ability to perform all 7 types of elemental magic, which is an ability that should only be possessed by one of the two queens. And so to prove that she is a sun queen, she has to undergo all these different trials that are pretty dangerous, and if she fails, she will be executed. The second main character is Eliana, and she lives 1,000 years after Riel. One day her mother vanishes, so she goes on this dangerous mission with a rebel captain to help find her. One thing that the author did that I thought to be a really interesting choice was to start the story with a chapter that takes place 2 years after everything that's going to happen to Riel. So it's kind of like an epilogue to Riel's story but a prologue to Eliana's story. And I don't know how I feel about that because I felt like this little epilogue slash prologue pretty much spoils everything that happens to Riel, and because of that I wasn't really excited to read Riel's chapters because I knew what is going to happen to her. Reading that very first chapter, I definitely had a lot of questions that would be answered throughout Riel's chapters, but it just wasn't as exciting to read them because I knew how things were going to end up for her. And with the trials that Riel goes through, it was definitely intense, but it didn't feel like anything new. It felt like I've read all of this before already. I did really enjoy seeing the aspects in Riel's storyline being interwoven into Eliana's storyline. I thought that was done really well. There is a big thing in this book that was revealed towards the end that I definitely didn't see coming that I probably should have because it's kind of obvious, but at the same time I never thought about it. Overall, it was still an enjoyable read, so I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars. The last 2 books that I read are books that I read during Booktubeathon. I have a whole Booktubeathon vlog that should already be posted before this video is uploaded, so definitely check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But the very first book that I finished was Crazy Rich Asians by Kwan. I wanted to read this book because of the Asian representation, and plus the movie is coming out, or it should already be out by the time I post this video. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows our main character Rachel, who agrees to spend the summer in Singapore with her boyfriend, who happens to come from a family that's crazy rich. This was a really entertaining story. It looks pretty small, but it's actually over 500 pages, and I read it in like 2 days. I devoured all the drama that was happening in this book, and I was really intrigued by the complex family dynamics. I really enjoyed the multiple point of views in this book, but I also felt like I didn't really get to know our 2 main characters, Nick and Rachel, very well. This whole book revolves around these 2 characters and their relationship, but with the multiple point of views, we don't really focus on their relationship very much, and we don't really see them together a lot. I like that they were a couple from the very beginning of the book, but aside from Nick's family members wanting to break them apart, there really wasn't anything about them that made me want to root for them. Obviously, I wanted them to be together, but there really wasn't anything else about them that made me want to root for them. And since they didn't have many scenes together in the book, I didn't find their relationship to be very romantic. Also, since there are so many minor characters, it can get confusing as to who is related to who, but the family tree at the beginning of the book definitely comes in handy. I do want to give a quick content warning about this book that it contains a few racial and homophobic slurs, and there's also cheating in this book. Other than that, I would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I finished in July is Sheets by Brenna Thummler. This is actually a graphic novel following our main character Marjorie, who is 13 years old, and she's basically in charge of running her family's laundromat. There's also a ghost who finds this laundromat, and the story goes from there. I really loved the colors that are used in this graphic novel. I talked about it in my Booktubeathon vlog, but for a majority of this book, the overall tone is very somber. Marjorie's mom has recently passed away and her dad is depressed. She doesn't really have any friends. I love the artwork in this book. I love the colors that the author uses and how the colors contrast with what's happening in the book, but I didn't love it. The ending of this book felt a little bit rushed and I felt like there could have been a little bit added more to it, but overall I would rate this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of July. If you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and I will see you next time. Bye!